Everyone, welcome to Movie Marathon's HQ, where we do movie marathons connected to new releases and where we enjoy and review some of our favorite movies. This video is part of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon, where we are watching one movie every week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026, now less than a year from now. Today we are discussing The Fantastic Four, released in 2005 and directed by Tim Story. This was the first actually released Fantastic Four movie. There was one that was created in the 60s that was never released. So this is the first actually released movie that we're going to get into today. This is an unpopular opinion, but I have never liked the Fantastic Four. I think their powers are all pretty dumb, except the Human Torch. And their whole thing about being Marvel's first family, I think has been done better by other Marvel superhero teams like the X-Men and even the Avengers. I think those teams are more of a family than the Fantastic Four are, and they ever have. So I've just never liked the Fantastic Four, and I don't buy into the hype. So going into it, you should know that. Overall, I don't like this movie. As I said, I don't like the Fantastic Four anyway, so this would have been an uphill battle. But there's really not a lot that's good in this movie, and it's mostly bad and very silly and just doesn't really work. I know most people have that opinion about this movie, but this is me trying to watch it with fresh eyes for this movie marathon. So we'll get into how it goes overall. For positives, I would mention some of the visual effects and some of the characterization of our Fantastic Four. And for negatives, I would say the rest of the characterization of the Fantastic Four, the casting, the origin story and plot, and then the rest of the visuals. Also, spoiler alert for Fantastic Four, as we're going to go into some details. So one element from this movie that I would consider positive are some of the visual effects. It's not perfect by any means, and it is 20 years old. But one choice that they made in this movie was to make the Thing, Ben Grimm's character portrayed by Michael Chiklis, as a practical effect. I don't think the visual effects were there at the time to do this digitally, so I think practical made sense. And the practical suit does look maybe as good as it could have. There's probably some improvements. It doesn't really have a lot of depth in the rock to it. It just feels like it's all the same color of orange. But I still think the Thing looks fairly good. And some of the other visual effects are good. The force field effect and some of Johnny's fire effects are good. They also have some really fun practical effects, like where Johnny Storm is holding a package of Jiffy Pop on his hands, which he heats up through his hand, and the Thing pops as if the popcorn is really popping in the Jiffy Pop. It's pretty cool. And they have a few moments like that where they've got some nice practical effects. So I have to give a shout out to the visual effects, although a lot of the visual effects are terrible. Another positive is some of the characterization of the Fantastic Four. As I've said before, I don't love them as characters, but Reed Richards is supposed to be dorky and awkward and too involved in his work. Sue Storm is supposed to be nurturing and loving and kind of a connector between the whole team. Johnny Storm is supposed to be brash and cocky and really sure of himself. And then Ben Grimm is supposed to be really stern and kind of the protector. So some of the characterization from the comics does transfer over into this movie. But really, the characterization for them, they don't work as a team. I just think they don't work. All of them as characters wouldn't actually interact, wouldn't be interested in each other. I know that two of them are brother and sister, but they seem like they despise each other. So they kind of got some aspect of the characterization, but it's mostly a miss. So now a negative is the rest of the characterization. As I said, some of the elements of the characters from the comics does transfer over into the movie, but I just found them all to be unlikable. Mr. Fantastic is unlikable and unrelatable, and Sue Storm just doesn't seem like she's interested in anybody in this movie. They have a really weird subplot where Victor Von Doom proposes to her even though they've never been in a relationship, and she like sort of entertains it, and then Mr. Fantastic is sad about it. It's just really weird. And then Ben Grimm is this protector character, and he's kind of the tough guy, but it just seems like it has no substance. And then Johnny Storm is cocky and he's really sure of himself, which that part is good. But he's also, I feel like, unlikable. He goes a little bit too far down that road where I don't root for him as a character. And then Victor Von Doom, he is megalomaniacal, which is on brand for Doom, but it just seems like an unreachable amount. It doesn't seem like he's a real person. So the characterization of most of the movie and most of the characters just does not work at all for me. Another negative is the casting. I really hate to pin the blame on actors for doing the job that they were hired to do, because it's not always their fault. It's often the director and the producers who want a specific performance from an actor, and then they deliver it, but then the performance doesn't work. It's because the director coaxed it out of the actor. But still, Johan Gruffold as Mr. Fantastic, it doesn't really work. He's maybe okay, but just the performance he gives is very dull, very dry, very boring. Jessica Alba, who I think does have some talent. In this movie, she's just hired for her physical appeal. She's in her underwear multiple times in multiple scenes, which is just kind of degrading to the character, who I'm not saying that she shouldn't have sexuality as part of her character, but they use it as a punchline every time. So that's not Jessica Alba's fault. That's just how they characterize her. But she also gives a pretty wooden performance in this movie and not very emotional at all, even in the emotional moments. Chris Evans, of course, this is his first foray as a Marvel character, and thank heavens he came back to be our Steve Rogers Captain America, where he's very well suited. And here he's not too terrible. He is cocky and he is very brazen in his characterization here. But he just kind of seems like a total a-hole and not as much like I can root for him or get behind him. Michael Chiklis as Ben Grimm, I think, is quite good. He really has some layers to his performance here, although what they do with the character is weird. And then Julian McMahon as Victor Von Doom is pretty bad, pretty cheesy and hokey, and how they use the character is also bad. So I don't blame this all completely on the actors, but just the casting didn't work and the characterization all in a package is a huge negative for this movie. And now another negative is just how the movie is. The plot and the origin story, they're just very silly. I feel like in the plot of this movie, they go from A to B and B to C and C to D because the movie tells them to, not because it actually makes sense for the plot to progress as it does. We know that from the comics, these characters get their powers from being in outer space, so they need to get them to space. Doesn't matter that none of them are astronauts. Doesn't matter that none of them are actually prepared for this. But the movie has to get them into space, so they just get them into space. And they just tell you to accept it because they're in space and they get their powers. And then, as I mentioned, the subplot about Victor Von Doom and Sue Storm having a romance comes out of nowhere, doesn't work, doesn't stay. It's pretty inconsequential. And then the whole idea that they're going to use the Fantastic Four and take their powers away so that Dr. Doom can take over, yeah, that's kind of nefarious and from the comics, but it just doesn't translate very well here. There's subplots about Ben Grimm accepting himself and his physical appearance. There's subplots about him losing a romance, then finding a romance. It all just seems like, okay, audience, here's a movie, and this is the movie for the movie's sake, but it doesn't feel coherent or cohesive at all. So I just found it really boring and really weird and disconnected. So that's kind of just the plot of the movie, which is a negative for me. And then another negative is just the visual effects. There are some shots of Johnny using his fire abilities that just look really bad. I know it works well on paper in the comics. They can draw him however they want, but as they tried to translate this into live action, I felt like it looked bad. And then Dr. Doom having electricity powers didn't look good in a lot of points. I did like his makeup, as his skin was kind of peeling off to show like metal underneath. But then it got weird because he put on a metal mask anyways. It seemed like that was your in to give him a metal face to be his actual face. Or just abandon the metal skin thing and just give him a mask. It seemed like they did both, which was weird. So the visuals and the visual effects in a lot of the movie just fell flat and didn't really work and looked pretty hokey. So that's yet another negative for this movie. Now, how might the Fantastic Four connect to Avengers Doomsday? So it was revealed this week that Chris Evans will return as Captain America Steve Rogers in Avengers Doomsday. So an actor from this movie will be in Doomsday, but he's portraying a different character. Chris Evans did reprise this same role as Johnny Storm in the movie Deadpool and Wolverine, where his character is in the void and meets up with Deadpool and has a pretty gruesome role to play there. So that character is dead in the MCU, so we won't see this version of Johnny Storm come back in Doomsday. Also, none of the actors in this movie are confirmed for the cast list, and I doubt they would bring them back. Maybe one or two of them is in, depending on what they do in Doomsday, maybe we'll see them show their faces, but I think that's really unlikely. So I don't think there's much connection here at all, other than Chris Evans will be in Doomsday, but as Steve Rogers. So that's my review of the Fantastic Four. What do you think of this movie, and how do you think it might connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. The next movie in this marathon is X-Men: The Last Stand. Follow Movie Marathons HQ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also on Letterboxd, where you can see all of the movie marathons that we have done and are doing right now. See you at the movies!